Hi everyone, it's Raymond Wood at the Raymond Wood Podcast. We're here back for another episode. I'm very, very excited to introduce you to Kathy DeMarcos, and we're going to do a little bit of an intro on who Kathy is and why we've got it in today, and we're super excited to have it on the podcast. So, good afternoon, Kathy.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. So, Kathy, you're currently based in Sydney.
I am.
And I want you just to give all of our listeners maybe just a little bit of a 2-minute intro to you and your business and what you do.
Gosh, okay. So Solutions to You is our actual business name. And we actually started the business with one really clear understanding, and that is to create a thorough and in-depth, perspective of what businesses are actually here to do, and that is to ensure that they have a deeper purpose other than selling a product, and certainly more than a service.
That nailed it probably in a minute and 60 seconds. That was a good one. So I want to get straight into it. We're going to deep dive straight in, and I'm going to explain a little bit later on in the podcast where it come about and how I met you. But let's talk about purpose straight off the bat and why it's important to you and why it's important to what you do in your day-to-day.
I guess for me, there's been lots of realizations. My background is actually 4 decades in finance. I set up, institutions, financial institutions. I've set up businesses since 1997. And through that, I actually had lots of life lessons, including having suicidal clients because I had to repossess businesses and high net worth clients' assets. And that made me realise that there was more to business. And so it was, gaining an understanding of what is the real reason why I'm here. And look, it took a long time to get to where I am today, but understanding that purpose is actually so much more than actually doing something for yourself. I actually allow my business to drive the purpose of other people's lives, businesses and choices. And that then has led me to realise I'm actually here to equip people to become self-reliant. And that is, the actual entanglement that actually involves is quite deep.
Yeah. So for our listeners, we'll talk about this in the second part on our involvement, my involvement with you, and around purpose. And just to touch on from my point, I think my purpose in the early years wasn't very clear. It was like, I just want to help soccer players get better at football. Yeah. But it wasn't a real purpose. And you've educated me and taught me to not only educate myself, but to educate staff members and even family members, my daughters. I speak a lot about you to my brother and my sister-in-law and all my family overseas.
Sorry.
About purpose, and obviously we'll touch on it as well about like retreats later on, but I think I've actually started to understand the whole bigger picture, and your purpose is the end where we want to be, and we're moving along that journey as we go through. So it's been really interesting. Now, one of the big things I wanted to ask you is as well, just to build a little bit more background for our listeners before we delve in. What are some of the, apart from Euro football star and professional player pathway, what are some of the current projects that you're allowed to share with our listeners that you could maybe touch on a little bit?
Look, I actually work at multi-leveled projects, and that includes working with visionaries, working with governments, working with businesses that are actually focused on social impact, and that includes across the world. It is giving them an understanding of what they can actually do for somebody else outside of the core of the business that they actually operate in, and also bringing it all together. I look at it as being really privileged in understanding how we can change policy to actually help those at grassroots. So I run projects in, Tanzania where we help grassroots farmers actually understand the difference between farming and actually having a business that actually becomes a co-op, which, you can then actually bring buyers back to the table. It changes communities. It's not just changing, people's lives. That's the difference. You know, so when you actually have a purpose that is actually about equipping somebody else to do something, oh my God, your entire life changes, you know, why you get up in the morning.
Yeah, as a different perspective. And that's one of the things I think I've realised is it's not just maybe teaching a boy or girl a particular skill in soccer or football, it's actually upskilling them for life as well.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we touched on with the book, with the professional player pathway. People maybe perceive it as just the pathway in football and when they're a player, but it's not. We're actually working on bigger things now, thanks to meeting you. So we're looking at that plan B. What if football doesn't work out, or what about when football comes to an end? What's the education like? What is have they been upskilled? Do they know what they're going to do next? And what is their purpose as well?
Do you know, it's interesting that you say that, and what you're doing is actually bringing so much more depth and clarity, not just to those boys and girls, but also to their parents. Yeah. And they may not realise that yet, but what you're actually also equipping them with is gaining a better understanding of who they are as adults, as parents, as leaders, as guiders to these young minds that perhaps have never genuinely had the opportunity to think differently.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that when I work with young kids running the leadership programs, I often say to them, what's the one thing that makes you really upset that you see in the world? And if an 11-year-old can actually sit down and say, Kathy, I really, you know, this upsets me. And then you ask them, what does it do for you? And they can express to you what those emotions are. And then you come back and you say, so what can you do about it? Yeah. And an 11-year-old has a solution. Can there be any greater gift? And in some ways, that's what you're actually starting to do with what you do in the program with the professional player pathway. You're getting them to understand that there is a different way of doing things.
Yeah. It was really interesting, and I've shared it with staff members and family and friends, but I haven't really shared it on the podcast. But it was really interesting. You've been in one of our rooms and you've been to our event, I think it was in Sydney, and we do our 2-hour free event, and it was really interesting because you actually made me realise that I always knew there was two groups of people in the room. There was the players and the parents, but I didn't actually really think that they actually both want different outcomes.
Yeah.
And what was really forefront in my mind, and I've realised this past 12 months, is that the mums and dads, with all due respect, they don't really care about the football or the sport. It's more about, is there an academic option? Is there an education?
Yeah.
Is there a job opportunity potentially at the end of it?
Yeah.
Because they understand that football might go for 10 years or 15 years, where the 11-year-olds in the room, they're just so football focused.
Yeah.
And I think our first offering that we made 18 months ago was very football focused. And we've come to that realisation that if we're talking about a pathway, it's got to be a life pathway, not just a football pathway.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
You know, it's the same thing in business. You know, people actually think that people turn up for a job or a role. No, they're turning up as a whole person. There is so much more to that person, and when you actually understand that in business, then you have a really different perspective. That's the same with sport.
Yeah, exactly the same. Exactly the same. Now, we're speaking about current projects at work, and I'm glad you bought them. You've got them in front of you. Now, I'm going to be really honest. I still haven't really read these fully, but I know you've given a gift of the book to my daughter, and she's read the book. Can we talk about the one closest to you? So the Same People, Different Vision.
Yeah, so this one was actually written, I started writing this when my father actually became critically ill, but it dawned on me that I actually had the ability to see things in business really, really differently, and it was coming from a solution focused. It wasn't just a win-win, it needed to be a win-win-win outcome at every time. And so it was just giving people an understanding as to how to look at things, but through a different lens. It's not being a different person, just having a really different perspective. And this gives examples, you know, including looking beyond being resilient. You know, I often say to people, resilient is a baseline. You need to start to become anti-fragile because that then strengthens you. And you would need that in sport as well.
Yeah.
right? What have you learnt? What have you taken away to actually strengthen from every situation?
Yeah.
So that's what this book actually includes.
Amazing. Now, it was funny, we touched on a little bit about social impact, and taking it back into football, I worked on one of the world's biggest projects with the Premier League back in 2011 for a few years. And they come up with a premise of, when we look at a player and we look at their learning journey, there's a four-corner model approach. And the four-corner model was physical, technical, tactical, and the interesting one was social. And when we had to sit down as a group, we had to talk about what each of them meant. We actually had to really talk about what it meant from a social point of view, on and off the park. And we discovered the stuff off the park socially was way more important than on it, because we discovered if we socially integrated these young boys and girls properly and taught them things about like social impact, they become better people off the pitch, which then makes them better players on the pitch and advocates of the game. Can you talk just a little bit about you? Like, you can give me one example of social impact and something that you've done or worked on, or explain it for someone. And I'll be honest, up until that point when I was working with these project managers on it, I didn't really fully understand, and I still don't believe I fully understand social impact from your perspective.
So I actually look at it as, you know, what are my skills? My skills are actually, I understand business, I understand finance, and I understand people. You know, I have a counselling background as well. So if I can actually take everything that I know and incorporate it in the way that I actually do business, and then actually show others how to do exactly what I do, which means that I actually have a very high percentage of my business, it's more than 50%, where my actual income goes towards equipping somebody else to actually do exactly what I do. That is a social impact. I don't get anything for it. I'm literally paying it forward. I'm actually showing you or Joe or Fred or Sammy how to actually set up a business, how they can actually get their staff to actually understand that they're not there to tick a box. They're there to actually do something that genuinely shows somebody else that they're there to serve them. That's all it is. And it's really hard for a lot of people to understand that. You know, people say to me, what do you do? I literally get up in the morning and think, how many people can I actually pass on that skill and knowledge so that they understand that the benefit that they give somebody else is going to create a ripple effect. That ripple effect, honestly, it's like that little drop, you know, that raindrop that actually falls into the water. Well, what happens? That body of water rises and everything in it rises at the same time. So if we actually share a little bit of our knowledge, a little bit of our time to somebody else to understand how we can contribute to elevate somebody else, oh my God, we are living on a totally different planet.
It's funny you spoke about paying it forward, and I think I've shared this with you, but a couple of years ago I first seen I think it was on TikTok, and it was a pay it forward sort of post that someone had put on, and it was a guy who was in a queue of McDonald's, and he said, the car behind, I'm going to pay for them. Yeah. So then when they pulled up, their food was paid for. Yeah. I'm not condoning fast food and takeaways as well, and make that one clear. And I think the first time I done it, I was in a supermarket in Woolworths, and there was an older lady behind me. Yeah. And I sort of hung around packing my bags, and a shopping come up. It was like $70. Yeah. And I've just tapped it before she could tap, and I've just run out. Yeah. And she was like absolutely confused. And I still really didn't get at that point what it was, paying it forward. Yeah. But the point I'm trying to get to that is that there's a lot of this going on now, and I think like the effects it has, it makes you feel good, but also just puts a smile on someone's day. You don't know what they're going through on a daily basis. Yeah. But it's one of the key ones that we wanted to make with the Pro Player Pathway when we set up the rooms around the world. We wanted it to be free. We want people to come in and learn. They get to come in with us and learn for 2.5 hours. Then if they choose to come on the programme, obviously there's a money element, but what we want to do is not hit people with money straight up front. It's like, come in, learn something, and you can walk out that room a lot more knowledgeable, and you don't have to contribute any money. And that, in a way, is us paying it forward a little bit. Can you give an example of you were paying it forward, and maybe a good one that you've seen, or one that you work on, or projects you've seen? Or
Well, the way we pay things forward is we actually run programs for young kids, and we run them from the ages of 11 all the way through to school leavers. They actually learn entrepreneurial skills, they learn leadership skills, communication, negotiating, the social impact, and it's all for free. You know, so, and we put through over 150 students every year, and then we do a second one which is specifically for school leavers, and again that's actually over 140 kids, and that is equipping them to enter the workforce. I also actually teach financial literacy. You know, I look at that as an opportunity to show people what they have never been able to understand before. So many people say numbers are just not my thing. But the reality is that numbers aren't your thing because nobody's really taken the time to allow you to understand in a way that you understand. Yeah. And so I do all of that. We do all of that for free. So the commitment then is, what are you going to then do for free as you pass it on?
Yeah.
And so you can see that the ripple effect is
again.
Just endless.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Before we go to our first break, we're going to finish off for this first section with how we met. Now, you've just spoke about entrepreneurial skills that you teach kids, and we did meet in an entrepreneurial room. And it's really interesting. I've gone into a few of these rooms over the past 3 or 4 years, and admittedly, when I was younger, you know, you get a lot of people in any way of life, a lot of egos, and then everyone wants to talk and they're chatting away. But it was funny in this room in Sydney, there was a lady sat there, which was you, and you were very quiet in the room, and I was sat in the corner myself trying to observe the room. And one of my mentors in the football world said one of the best things you can say sometimes is say nothing and just sit there. And he said the person who doesn't say much, they're normally the most interesting person in the room. So I obviously did come up to you and ask you who you was and what you were doing in there, because I was really intrigued. And yeah, we just talk a little bit about how we met that day in that room and why you were in that room that day.
I always actually have a belief that I don't know everything. And so, you know, I need to actually put myself in situations where there's an opportunity for me to learn. And that was no different. Also actually getting to know where different people are at, you know, especially when you're going into a room where there's entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Everybody's, you know, coming from a really different place. And so I had actually brought my son in, and you don't even remember seeing him, right?
I definitely.
And he was talking a lot. So for me, it was, I mean, he's on an entrepreneurial journey as well. So it was like, just turn up. You just don't know what you're going to learn. So it was curiosity. You got to be curious in life. And so that's what really brought me into that room. Did I walk away with, you know, any learnings? I think some of the learnings were in what not to do.
Yeah. But at least you're learning still.
Look, I'm eternally learning.
Yeah.
And also actually discovering more about myself.
Yeah.
That's an eternal learning curve.
Yeah. It's really interesting we talk about entrepreneurial rooms, and I want to cover this one off because I know growing up, we had a good upbringing and mum and dad looked after us, and we didn't want for nothing. We had food on the table, we had clothes on our backs, we went to school, we could never complain.
Yeah.
But we didn't have as much as other kids and vice versa. But really interesting growing up, and you'd sit and watch mainstream TV and media and newspapers and the way entrepreneurs are depicted. And they're all money hungry people, and they're bad people, and they're going to do wrong by it, and they're not good people, and they don't pay any taxes. And it's really interesting going from the upbringing I had to now being an entrepreneur and trying to run multiple businesses and trying to help people and have a purpose. It's really interesting once you go into the world. It's like with anything in life, there's good and bad people, admittedly.
Yeah.
But I must say I've met a lot of really amazing people who go under the radar.
It's interesting. I think I was listening to something this morning, and they were actually talking about one of the highest awards that the King just recently awarded some people. And there was a debate about who they actually...
I read this.
So we won't go into detail, but I think for
Is
me...
it about a certain person from Victoria?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes. And so, for me in that moment, the point of crystallisation is that there are people that are actually publicly seen and known, and it's them that seem to be recognised. But there are so many people that exactly what you've just said, fly in under the radar and just get stuff done.
Yeah.
And they're the silent heroes, but they're the ones that are actually creating greater impact.
Yeah. It was interesting. I read, I listened to like a podcast a few weeks ago, and it was a guy called Martin Golden, and they spoke about there's two types of heroes. He said there's heroes, the ones who want to be in the limelight and want to get a certificate and a trophy.
Yeah.
And then there's the superheroes.
Yeah.
And his depiction of the superheroes are the ones who go, you'll never know who they are and the names, but they're just working away in the dark, just making it happen. And I think, from my point of view, looking at it that way, I think it's a nice way to be, and you're going out with the right purpose in life.
I talk about that a lot. That's actually chasing the shiny object.
Yeah.
That shiny object being a trophy, that shiny object being the next new thing. If you were here genuinely to serve a bigger purpose in life, none of that matters. You just get in, you roll your sleeves up, you find a way how to do it. That grit and determination is what actually gets you up every single day, because that purpose is bigger than you.
Yeah, it is. And it's to finish on that one, we've gone down this journey with people chasing trophies in the sports world and chasing trophies at 10 and 11 and 12. And I'm like, my big ambition in life is to have many, many pictures on my website of players that we've helped along the way. And they're my trophies, to see smiling faces that they've had some involvement in football, and hopefully from a playing point of view, they've had some form of a career. But then they've gone on to something bigger and better past that, because to them at a young age, they think playing pro football is the be and end all.
Yeah.
But it's only when you get old like me and you actually realise there's a little bit past that playing career.
Yeah.
And it's what you're doing past that, and that's what's really important. We're about to go to our first ad break, and we will be back in a few minutes, but a big thank you for listening to our first part.
Would you one day like to be a professional football player? Would you like to be part of our pro player pathway? What is the pro player pathway? It's an opportunity for all Australian football players aged between 10 and 23 who want to join us to become the next professional football player. On the pro player pathway, you get to join me and my team free of charge to an event all around Australia. When you join me, we're going to teach you the secrets of football in Europe. And one day, maybe, you could be gracing the Champions League final. Guys, over the next 12 months, we're going to be coming around all the major cities of Australia. And when we come around all the major cities, we're going to be running our free events everywhere we go. So guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's a free event. It's for boys and girls aged 10 to 23. And I'm going to teach you the secrets of becoming a top European football player. Oh, and one final thing. We're going to be giving away 20 scholarships to join me on this program of a lifetime.
Hi everyone, it's Raymond Wood of the Raymond Podcast. We're back with Kathy DeMarcos. Now, we just spoke a little bit about how we met, and in the first section we spoke about one of your books, which was The Same People, Different Vision. Can you talk a little bit about this next book?
Yeah.
So, was this first, or was that one first?
No, this was the first one.
So this is your second
and
one?
There's a few in between.
Yeah.
But that one was specifically created because a lot of people don't know how. How is, I think, the most common question I get asked, and it's one word, right? Yeah. How do you do it? Well, it's that. It's being intentionally conscious. And a lot of people talk about being intentional and they talk about being conscious. But I say until you actually know how to map those two things together, it does not work. And so being intentionally conscious talks a little bit about my life, and where that trajectory changed, living with a Maasai some 9 years ago, and actually understanding the cues that we get, the little nudges, because we all get them. Yeah. It's whether we recognize them or not, and that's being intentionally conscious. So that actually creates a roadmap. It's actually about gratitude, and it's about reflection. and it's about setting your goals and intentions.
Yeah.
So, and it's got lots of my personal quotes and personal photos in there.
So when you talk about gratitude, what does gratitude mean to you?
Do you know, it's interesting because I think people look at me and think that gratitude and joy mean that everything goes right, you know. You've got everything to be happy for. Well, I'm actually even grateful for the situations where I find struggles, you know, obstacles, where I actually really am challenged. I'm grateful for those moments because they're my greatest opportunity to learn and discover more about who I choose to become.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny how many people in life, in society in general, they see something that's gone wrong, but they just see it straight away as a negative. And then they end up down that rabbit hole. And I think I spoke to you. I went and seen a movie the other day, and I won't spoil it, but there was a particular movie that's just come out, and I think it's the fourth one in these type of movies without spoiling the movie. But there was a guy who died in the movie,
right?
And he has a cardiac arrest, and while he's dead, he has an epiphany that, like, why do we worry about so much stuff?
Yeah.
And why are we not living with less fear?
Yeah.
Why are we not more grateful? And then he got brought back to life, and he come back a completely different person, and he started living from that point forward, and that was really interesting. And I didn't expect to see it in this movie because it's an action movie and it's all fast and pace and people getting shot and killed. But it was like, for me, it's funny how you start to notice different things in movies and books and podcasts that you wouldn't normally pick up on. Really interesting on the front cover of this book is choosing not to sleepwalk through life.
Yeah.
Come on, build on that a little bit for us.
Well, actually, it's one of my TED Talks. It's my second TED Talk. So, you know, I'm a really big believer that I think most of us actually sleepwalk through life. And what I mean by that is we're not conscious. Everything that we do is just on autopilot. We do what we've done yesterday. Our actual belief system is actually based on what we have actually done in the past or what somebody else has told us. That is sleepwalking. And so for us to genuinely change that dial, change the motherboard and create a new imprint, we've got to do something different. But that means that we've got to be so present. Eckhart Tolle, talks about that quite a lot, about being present in the moment. Well, when you're present in the moment, you will notice the smallest of things. Yeah. And you've heard me say that, I've noticed your actual breath just changed. What just happened for you? And people go, what? But that's actually being awake and conscious and present for, whatever's happening in front of you.
I think that goes back to when I've spoke to you about this, about when we get in the football world and you get a player, and people think getting a younger player is always better because you can imprint and teach them things from day one. And that's true, because players who are 15, 16, unfortunately, one of the processes we discovered in the Premier League level is that if you are, say, a Manchester City and you're getting a player from, say, Oxford United, and no disrespect to Oxford, but sometimes there's a learning in there that you've got to unlearn a process and then relearn. And that's probably the same in your world. And I know you've spoke about that.
Yes. So, gosh, I think there's staff that have actually written about how I actually do that. And it is what they tend to say is, Kathy actually helps you become comfortable with being uncomfortable, which actually means that it's actually showing you what's not serving you, and that's what needs to be unlearnt.
Yeah.
So that you then can create a new imprint. And that new imprint is actually about helping you become that person that you choose to become.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the next one I'm talking about that, the person you choose to become, where we're going now. We're going to start talking retreats in Bali. And I was, like most people, guilty of blockages, and you just put roadblocks. And we get it in the room, like when we go in with parents, and they all come in with the best intentions. We want our son or daughter to make it as a professional, and the minute you give them an opportunity to join you on the programme, they start coming up with all the hurdles, all the blockages, the reasons why. And it's like, wait there, you've come in this room saying you've never had an opportunity like this before. We're going to give you a scholarship, but then you come up with every excuse under the sun. I'm one of them. You invited me to a retreat to Bali, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and we're going to spend probably 10 minutes on this one. And I don't think intentionally I come up with blocks, but I used my 2 daughters as excuses, the business as excuses. Yeah. And firstly as well, my depiction of what a retreat in Bali was, I'm thinking sleeping until 11 o'clock, having a breakfast, sit round the pool, go on a waterfall, meditate, have dinner, maybe have a beer or 2, and then you go to bed. Definitely is not like that. I can tell you for all my listeners, it was like going to the gym for 8 days, but not working on this physical body, working internally.
Yeah.
So we went from 6 a.m. till midnight most nights. We experienced some of the most amazing things. So for everyone who's listening in, why retreats and why Bali?
A number of reasons. First of all, it's taken me 5 years to actually find the right location, the right co-facilitator. Everything that I actually do is, there's a lot of thought process. So the retreat is actually curated, but until you actually take people out of their environment, those patterns keep actually coming up, right? They will actually creep in at the retreat as well. But when you place people in an environment where you are genuinely supporting them and actually being intentional and conscious about everything that they're experiencing and addressing it as they actually arise, then you can't help them actually break that circuit. And people actually come because they genuinely want to become that better person. You know, a lot of people actually say, you know, I feel stuck, or, you know, I want to succeed, but they don't know what succeed actually means. Or, you know, I want to actually contribute. Well, what do you want to contribute to? There is something, they're yearning something, they have no idea what it is. And when they actually, you know, reach that point of, all right, I'm going to do it, then that's when I actually know that they're ready, because people aren't just they can't just apply and they won't even see it anywhere.
Yeah.
They need to be invited. This is curated to have the right people in the room that are ready for genuine transformation. I don't just use and throw words out.
Yeah.
This is real transformation, which you've seen, and the transmissions that you actually get come from having a retreat done in a particular way. There's a sequence. You know, just like any change has a sequence. Manifestation just doesn't happen. There's a sequence, right? So Bali, this particular location, you know, it actually has a natural waterfall. It is so powerful, which you know.
Yeah.
It has natural springs, but the land is actually permaculture land, so it's actually farm to plate. So everything about it is actually about its purity. So you were engulfed.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was physically tired when I got home. Like, I felt like I needed to have a week's holiday on a beach somewhere to recover. But it was, and it's made me look at everything in life in general completely from a different lens. And I know we've spoken about that. And what I thought was a purpose really wasn't me thinking big enough. It was thinking very small.
Do you know, and I think sometimes when people are actually asked, what's your purpose, they either have no idea or they'll actually choose something that they know that they will succeed.
Yeah.
That is not what a purpose is. I think I had a discussion this morning, you know, and somebody said, well, what's your purpose? And I said, my purpose is actually to equip people to become self-reliant. And they went, holy crap, that's massive. And I went, I didn't choose it to actually, you know, succeed. I chose it so that I keep striving to get there.
And to stretch it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were on the retreat, I will, if it's okay with you, I'll share a little bit about the retreat. So we've done a whole heap of things like meditation, yoga. We had discussion groups, which are very private and personal, which was good. It was emotional. It was exciting. It was happy. I think one of my biggest takeaways was actually, and I've done a lot of research and reading on it, but it was all around about being grounded and being at one with nature, and like those waterfalls that we experienced, and the water ceremony that we done was just unbelievable.
Yeah. You know, I meditate, but you would have noticed that as I sat under that waterfall, I really wasn't there.
Yeah.
And that is the gift that you actually get when you genuinely immerse yourself and you actually understand to the depth of what you're actually there to do, and allowing yourself to go through that process, that actual inner, learnings that you do there, you can't just do, in your normal environment. And it has to be a repeated pattern. Yeah. When you don't actually keep doing that and then adding and building, it doesn't create a new, circuit on that motherboard.
Yeah.
And it actually genuinely starts from in here, to be quite honest. So,
a big one from the sports world, I know you're privy to, but like nutrition is super, super important. And I think that week spent in Bali, like just some of the foods we had and the colours in the foods, like I've never seen. What was that purple fruit we were eating? Was it
the dragon?
The dragon fruit.
Not the dragonfly, but the dragon fruit.
Yeah, we won't talk about dragonflies. We might do in a minute, actually. But yeah, just the food, like, was unbelievable. Yeah. And these amazing people in Bali who literally are there servicing you, breakfast, lunch, evening meal. Yeah. Nothing is ever a problem. Yes. Everyone's got a smile on your face. And I'm sitting there thinking, they've actually got it right. Maybe we've got it all wrong over where we live. And they just seem so happy and content. And
it's service.
Service, yeah.
They're there to serve.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we forget in business, in relationships. It's not about what I can get.
Yeah.
It's about what can I genuinely give you. Yeah. And a lot of people actually think that that's what they want. Yeah. But it's not even about what they want. Understand what people need. Yeah. Listen to what they say they want, and actually serve them so that they walk away in a much better place.
Yeah. It's funny, we spoke about, I think, at dinner last night, and we went out with a few friends and we spoke about one of the big ones that I got from one of the clubs I worked with over the years was serve others before self. And it's such a valid point, but I think as well, it definitely is important. You need to make sure you look after you. But my point with that is if you're going to serve others before self, to be able to serve others, you've got to look after yourself. And you've got to spend that time on yourself. And that's one of the things that I've realised, that I'm trying to do so much for my two daughters. I'm trying to do so much for staff. I'm trying to do so much for all of our players globally around the world.
Yeah.
But you also forget the most important element, and that's you.
Yeah.
And just to touch on that one, and if you can speak a little bit about why you think that's so important, and as the retreat is important for people.
Do you know, it comes back to how can you possibly honestly give service, advice, support to somebody else when you are not actually whole yourself? And I come back to, we've talked about it before, but vibration and energy. So if I'm actually not at my highest potential, at my highest vibration, I'm actually going to then be lowering anything that I actually put out into the world. So for me to be able to support you, I have to take care of me.
Yeah.
So my day, as you know, between 4 and 6, I wake up, but it starts with a meditation. I need to actually ground myself and actually know what it is that I'm doing for myself, healing myself, keeping myself pure, and then I can actually go out and do what I need to do.
Amazing. Now we have to go to another quick break, so I apologise, but we're going to come back and we're going to finish off with something that I originally signed up for and can't commit to now, but you are going to be doing. And I'm hoping that I can get involved a little bit more next year. So again, big thank you. We're going to go to our next ad break and we'll be back with you in a couple of minutes.
Hey everyone, we are coming around every major city in Australia over the next 12 months. We have got free objective football testing going on, guys. It's for boys and girls aged 10 all the way through to 18 years of age. The objective testing is quite simple. We'll put you through our 6 tests and then give you your results, physical, technical and tactical. And also, we're going to choose 16 winners to join us on an all expenses paid trip to Europe in 2024 and also 2025. Guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's free to sign up. You get free objective testing and you'll get a free feedback, and maybe you'll be joining me at the Santiago Bernabeu in 2024 or 25.
Hey everyone, it's Raymond Wood at the Raymond Wood Podcast. We're back with Kathy DeMarcos for our final little section. Now, originally a couple of months ago, I signed up. I seen this initiative online called the Vinnie's Sleep Out, and I since have had to cancel because I've got to go to Singapore for work. But then I discovered that you're going, and not only you going, you know some of the people at the higher level who are involved in it. So we want to give it a good push because obviously I've seen a lot of amazing stuff and what it's about and the reason why we're doing it. So can you explain to our listeners? To maybe give Vinnie's a bit of help with this.
So this is actually their 20th year, and originally actually started from, some women sitting around a table and talking about the homelessness situation. And, that was in New South Wales, but this has now actually become Australia-wide. And St Vincent's obviously does quite a lot of work in supporting, the homeless. It's, providing food, shelter, even support network in respect to trying to place them into employment. So when I actually was invited to sit down in New South Wales and to speak to the CEO of Vinnie's and the actual founder who started the CEO Sleep Out and a few of the local people within council, they started to identify it has become an increasing crisis. So here we are in the 21st century, 20 years on, and we have more people homeless today than what we have ever had. And part of that is actually, attributed to we have no housing. We've got a housing crisis, but it's beyond that. So we talked about, for me, it is what's the preventative situation? We've got to really look to address that. But in the first instance, we've got to go back to Maslow's law. We've got to make people feel safe.
Yeah.
So this Sleep Out, and it's national, is actually about raising much needed funds to actually at least get people off the street and in shelter to start off with. So people are contributing to a one night, and by no means does that actually give us an understanding as to what it's like. But that actual raising of funds is actually going to get perhaps somebody, one meal, a night off the street, maybe a week's meals. For me, it is just actually being conscious, Can you contribute? Can you do something? I mean, I know Australia is actually a really generous nation and we contribute to a lot of things, but this is something that I know we walk past and we look at people and we think another homeless person, but what are we going to do to contribute?
Yeah. The first time I come across homelessness, I'll be honest, when I really felt I was aware of it was in my early 20s. I was living in the US.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it. Like, it was like, what? Like, every bridge you drove under, there was 10, 20 people. And then to live in places like, I was very fortunate, I think I've said to you, in places like Las Vegas and Nevada, like, that was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I actually sat down one day with another coach from London, and we sat down and we decided to go out that day and take food out with us and sausage rolls and sandwiches, and we just talked to people.
Yeah.
And the general people we were speaking to were like people who discovered their wives or husbands had maybe been cheating on them, they got divorced, they took all the money, they went to Vegas, lost it all, and they had nowhere to go. And it was absolutely devastating. And then I told you last night at dinner, like, Hawaii was one of the worst places I've seen. Like, you wouldn't think Hawaii, and you see all the money in tourism, but in the back streets of Hawaii, I just still don't get how it can happen on this planet. And, we think we've got problems because the microwave breaks or we've got a flat tire, but we haven't really got problems when you see what a lot of people are going on with.
There is so much that actually leads to homelessness, and I think for me that's one of the things that I'd really love to be able to address. We've got to equip people to actually be in a better position so that they don't get to that stage, and that includes, their actual mental stability, their actual ability to be employed, education. There is so much more that's involved, but for the time being, we need to get people in shelter.
Yeah, and get off the streets.
So
we will obviously share the links into our show notes for everyone who's listening.
Yeah.
And obviously it's one that we really want to support, and we'll jump on and make a donation as well. Again, in the show notes we're going to put in about your books, and also we're also pleased we've finally got the Pro Player Pathway book, which I'm super proud of, and we'll share that in the show links. Now also we are going to be coming back, and the idea is to do 3 podcasts with you, and hopefully I haven't overcommitted you and I've roped you in. But what we're going to do is we're going to probably spend the whole episode on purpose, because I think it's really important, not more so for our players, but our mums and dads actually understanding a purpose.
Yeah.
And then obviously we want to then revisit also a little bit about like retreats and bettering yourself and empowering yourself. So if you will join us again for those other 2 episodes when you come up to Brisbane, we'd love to have you on.
Pleasure.
So a big thank you from me at the Rainbow Podcast and Kathy DeMarcos for joining us, and we look forward to speaking to you all in our next episode. A big thank you. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.